Welcome to the channel, guys. My name is Jess. So Bitcoin continues to hover just above the top of the weekly range, and while the larger picture is still looking pretty shaky, the short time frame charts might actually be starting to flip bullish. In today's video, we're going to dive into all the recent price action and what it means, including what exactly we need to see from Bitcoin to flip the charts back up, and the key economic news that could impact the next major move. Let's get into it. Before we dive in, make sure you guys smash that like button and subscribe to the channel to get regular Bitcoin analysis every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And sign up to my free Telegram for more regular Bitcoin updates. If you're a trader and you're interested in joining my VIP channel, be sure to message me down below on Telegram. VIP gives you exclusive access to my personal trading setups with exact entry points, targets, and stop losses. Alrighty guys, so jumping into the charts, let's first talk about all the recent price action. So the last couple of days has been a pretty dicey period for Bitcoin, and just as we talked about in the last video, we did end up seeing a little bit of a breakdown, right? So that sort of weekly candle close that we had last Monday, despite it being bullish, Bitcoin still had a bit of a tumble throughout the week, particularly after losing this bearish structure we mapped out here in our last video, this ascending broadening wedge. So after the breakdown here of that trend line, Bitcoin tumbled all the way down to retest those equal lows we talked about right here at $100,000, and that is when we bounced. Now, this recovery here has been really bizarre, a little bit weird, and a little bit unexpected as well, right? So we tapped a macro level of support. Understandable that we saw, a little bit of a pullback. Even on the daily chart, we can see we tapped the 50 EMA, this sort of blue dynamic level of support. But the price action since has been I guess suspiciously bullish, you could say, even if we zoom into the smaller time frame charts on like the 5-minute charts, the 10-minute, 30-minute charts, we can see like continued extended exhaustion, and yet we just keep climbing upwards. Now, a couple days ago as well, we also had NFP data come out. So that was on the 6th of June, I think. Yeah, so 6th of June for those of us in Australia. I'm not sure what exactly day that would have been for you guys in America or wherever you might be in the world, but that came out bearish as well. So non-farm payrolls is the amount of jobs that's been created that aren't from the government, and essentially this was higher than forecasted. So forecasted amount and consensus amount was 130,000, and the actual result for NFP was 139. Unemployment rate was pretty much the same, and the hourly earnings and average earnings, like overall, spiked upwards, right? So all of that, although it senses good things for the economy is growing, jobs are growing, that's great. But in terms of the market, when we're sort of pivoting or waiting for that pivot for interest rates, that's not particularly bullish, right? Because if the economy is growing, inflation's more likely to be growing, and hence, we're less likely to be getting interest rate cuts. Now, in 3 days' time as well, we've also got CPI data coming out, and the forecast for CPI is for inflation to be heading upwards, right? So if we just take a look over here, month-on-month core inflation should be going up, same with year-on-year, and that's the same for this sort of regular inflation or headline inflation, which should also be going up from 2.3 to 2.5%. So overall, we're expecting that inflation is getting worse, the economy is growing, but that should technically be quite bearish in terms of how the market is perceiving that. And yet, despite that news, Bitcoin continued to really sort of just push onwards and upwards. Like the price action refused to go down. And so that's really interesting. And part of me does want to believe that that is manipulation. There's something going on behind the scenes that we, the rest of the world, retail doesn't really know about. But regardless of whether or not it is manipulation or it isn't manipulation, whether or not it's like organic or inorganic, it doesn't really matter because it's still happening in the price action. And so with it happening, it is changing the way the charts look. And the short time frame charts, with this massive recovery that we've seen here, is very slightly starting to look bullish again. So we're just going to dive into the charts today and talk about the macro positioning of Bitcoin on the weekly chart, and then zoom into the short time frame. Why exactly are these charts flipping bullish, and what exactly do we need to see for the the bullish narrative to really start to play out? So starting off our analysis on the weekly chart, let's first talk about the macro positioning here for Bitcoin. And if you guys have been following my videos for a little bit of time now, you would know exactly what I'm about to talk about, which is the top of this weekly range here at $104.4 thousand. Now we can see over the last 3 weeks of price action, Bitcoin has been really precariously tapping at that level as a base of support. We've seen large wicks underneath it and sort of these rapid recoveries right before the close happens to sit back above $104.4 thousand, right? And that's what also kind of makes me suspicious about that rally that we've seen on the short time frame, because prior to that, we were very well below that range, right? We were at $100,000. We were very well traveling within this, and the possibility of recovering in time for the weekly candle close was looking quite grim. And now suddenly the charts are starting to really flip. So what we're looking for in the next 24 hours with this upcoming weekly candle close is for it to be above $104.4 thousand. And even more ideally, we'd love to see a bullish engulfing candle pop up above the top of that sort of prior candle over there to signal that the charts have really flipped on this weekly time frame, right? Where they were really establishing that 104.4K as a base of support and thereby preventing the fall back within this weekly range to test 100K, 93,000, and the last time we tested that, we fell below and we went all the way down to 74,000, right? This is a really sort of crucial moment in the macro price action. And, you know, if you go back to 2021, this is sort of the exact same pattern, the sort of weekly range pattern, deviation high and breakdown. That is exactly what sort of signaled the top in 2021 as well, right? So sort of a really important period for Bitcoin. So with all that in mind, let's dive into the shorter time frame chart. Now on the daily chart here is where we can begin to start to talk about what we need to see from Bitcoin to actually distinctively flip the charts bullish, right? We know that just simply closing above 104.4K on the weekly chart isn't really enough, right? We saw that last week. We still had a continued bearish movement towards 100K. What's really going to actually flip it bullish on both the short time frame and the high time frame as well? So here on the daily chart, what we're looking at is this level of resistance right here at 104.7 thousand, ranging up to 106K, right? This sort of blue box range that I've drawn in, and we can see exactly why that's a level of resistance. It acted as a resistance in the past on the daily time frame right here. We had consistent closes below that level, and over here as well, if we take a look at the more recent segment of price action, flipping below $106,000 is where Bitcoin started to see the steeper end of this bearish move, right? When we went all the way down to fill this volume gap and move down to 100K, these equal lows down here. So in order to flip these daily time frame charts to being bullish, what we want to see is a daily candle close above that level of resistance. I would actually be inclined to even extend this box of resistance here right up to that buy side liquidity, or the end of that wick there at $106.7 thousand as well, right? Because if we zoom into the smaller time frame, that is the prior high that we are looking to break in the current short time frame downtrend. So zooming into the 4-hour chart here, what we can see is even more interesting, and it gives us even more confirmation sort of factors for what exactly we're looking out for in terms of Bitcoin actually flipping the charts to being bullish. And the first thing that we have to note here is this bullish structure that we've ended up forming after that more recent sort of downwards move and consequential bounce, right? We've formed an a descending parallel channel structure. Now these are usually bullish, and they have the measured move being the height of the channel, taking us from the breakout point all the way up to around $110,000, right? So pushing past all these levels of resistance into this liquidity zone and right up to that prior high at 110K. Now that is sort of the most ideal scenario that we have for Bitcoin, because even if we go over to the weekly chart, that would essentially take Bitcoin to go on and engulf that prior red candle, that sort of ideal scenario that we just talked about. But whether or not that's possible is going to rely on what we're seeing in the next couple of hours on this 4-hour chart. So we've broken out the structure. That's great, but diagonals are one thing and horizontal levels are another, right? So what we're looking out for after this breakout is a push above that very first change of character level here on the charts, being the prior high in this downtrend at 106.7 thousand, the exact top of this sort of blue box that we drew out on the daily chart. And even if we take that away, we can see it very clearly here on the 4-hour time frame, mapped out for us by the smart money concepts indicator. We have two red sort of rectangles marking resistance, first of all from 104.9 to 106.7, and then again from 106.3 to $107,000, right? We've got two sort of boxes of resistance, and pushing above those levels, we can then flip these charts being bullish, right? We've push past the first change of character level, right? Because even though we've broken out of the structure, Bitcoin is still currently forming lower highs, right? And in fact, if we take a look at these two most recent points in the trend line, right here, we're actually currently potentially creating equal highs, right? A double rejection from resistance and potential, failure to break out and another bearish move downwards. And so that takes us to the conversation of momentum, right? Because that's going to tell us leading or before the price action actually happens, how likely it is that we're going to push past this resistance. And taking a look at RSI, what we're really looking for here is the push above 58.66 or this red line. The last 3 times that we've tapped this level of resistance here, our downtrending resistance on the 4-hour chart, we have seen that momentum has failed or struggled to push past 58.66, right? We've sort of seen that stagnation. That is our equal high resistance here on the RSI. And to see momentum flip bullish, we want to push above that level, right? That's going to signal we have a high probability of forming a higher high for the first time in this segment of price action and actually flipping the shorter time frame and the daily chart as well to being bullish. So all of this analysis is to say that while Bitcoin isn't looking as bearish as we were 2 days ago before this bounce and before this really weird and suspicious climb upwards, we still haven't quite gone in the clear. And I know I said that in my last video, and it's probably so annoying. You guys are like, oh my God, Jess, we've bounced. Why doesn't it look bullish yet? But we know exactly right? We haven't actually flipped this very first change of character. This is a potential rejection point. We're at a massive level of resistance on both the 4-hour and the daily chart. And Bitcoin is still really clearly on that edge of the cliff. We're still hovering right above the top of the weekly range. And there is still a potential that in the next 24 hours, if Bitcoin doesn't retain this sort of movement and this breakout structure that we're sort of mapping out here, there is a potential here that the weekly chart will still close bearish despite the aggressive rallying that we've seen over the last 48 hours of price action. And so essentially, if you didn't take your longs over here, right now is probably a little bit too late to be looking at longs until we see those confirmation factors we just talked about. And so with that in mind, let's really quickly go over the bearish case scenario, right? So what happens if this becomes an equal high? We end up seeing a double top rejection over here and we fall back below this trend line, right? So we invalidate the structure and Bitcoin heads back downwards. So on the way downwards, what we're looking out for is the smaller levels of support that Bitcoin has established in this little move up. So first of all, we have this low created on the very short time frame at $104,000. That is currently, I would say, our short time frame level of horizontal support and the very first sort of trigger for a bearish continuation on the short time frame, right? And that also pretty much sits right below that weekly candle or the weekly range, right? So where we want to be, and marks out on the short time frame where things become bearish on the high time frame as well, right? That's the trigger point. And we have the 200 EMA right below it too, right? So confluence for this level of support. And if Bitcoin rejects here and we fall below that level of support at 104K, what we're looking at then is a continued retracement to retest that equal low, that prior low here at $100,000. And that is when things start to look quite critical once again. As you guys can imagine, we fall back below the weekly range. On the daily time frame, we go back to retest that 50 EMA and that level of support. And as we know, the more and more times we retest a level of support, the more likely we are to absorb that level, the buying pressure at that level, and see a breakdown. Alrighty guys, that is a wrap on the analysis for today. Thank you for tuning in for another episode. If you enjoyed the video or you learned something, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel to get regular Bitcoin analysis every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And join my free Telegram for more regular Bitcoin updates. If you're interested in my VIP trading channel, don't forget to message me down below on Telegram. VIP gives you exclusive access to my personal trading setup, so the exact entry points, targets, and stop losses. Hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!